we'd all gotten drunk the night before on a Saturday night. I think we wrestled in Charlotte or Greensboro, and it was a 3 o'clock show in Wilmington, sold out. First match was me and Wahoo. Valentine was wrestling Tim Woods off another hot angle. So Wahoo, who had a party at his house, at his apartment that night over on Sharon Amity, elected to drive, as he did a lot of times. So the plane originally was supposed to have Wahoo on it, and Jimmy Crockett. Jimmy was at the party, so he wasn't going. So he called his brother David and said, David needs you to make Wilmington. So that's how David even ended up on the flight. Because they, one thing about the Crockett, they worked as hard as we did. I mean, they traveled with us, they went, and so I guess I left Wahoo's that night about, probably myself like 4 in the morning and went home. So I was flying though. So got out there at 1 o'clock, and it was a beautiful day. But, as I've told 1,000 times, we had no idea how far over gross we were. 6 guys, 5 wrestlers, average weight around 250 pounds at that point in time. David was probably 200 pounds, so let's say average weight of 240 pounds. We were overgrossed by 1,400 pounds, So Farkas compensated, but unbeknownst to all of us, by carrying less gas. And we had a headwind, as you often do, going to the coast. And he had the headphones on. We were laughing and talking, and the gas gauges were at that point in time, and on that particular plane, not in the dashboard, but they were up above, on a different board, different area, like the oil pressure and all that.
So you could even see it from the seats in the back.
Oh yeah, because Valentine was watching the gas gauge go down, and he kept, John was a big river. I was watching it, but I wasn't thinking anything. I was waiting for until you didn't even think about it. We were watching him go right to zero, and apparently, what I've been told is that Michael Farkas hit Raleigh. He said, I can push it. I'm going to make it instead of just stopping and getting some gas, which would have been the logical thing to do, a little easier than what we did. But he decided to push it, and sure enough, when the right engine went down, he pulled reserve tanks, which I don't know why he did that, because we didn't have any gas in them. Thank God now, because, as I look back on it, you've seen the plane. If there had been fuel in the plane, we would have caught on fire and we would all have died. But we just threw no reserve gas, and about 1 minute after the right one went down, the left one went down, and we coasted in at a high rate of speed.
And Valentine was sitting on the front seat, and in an interview that he did about, it was a little less than 10 years ago, he says that originally that was supposed to be the spot that you were going to take.
No, I've heard that story before. The guy with the most seniority always got that spot. I wish it had been my spot. Sitting in the back seats was the shits. Yeah, so whatever story he's telling there, that was the premier spot on the plane. Wahoo would have been sitting there, and Valentine that would have been a big fight. So who sat there? That was the back seats on those planes, like the back two. I had enough seniority to get ahead of Bruggers and David Crockett. The rest of it was, Woods was next to me. We were behind, and it was David and and Bob. But those planes were incredibly small. He was sitting in the catbird seat because he.
This was seniority.
He was the seniority, yeah. So that's another ludicrous story that's absurd. But the reason Valentine's is wrecked, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. That's why he's a mess. That's why. Has that ever been footnoted?
No.
Yes, he didn't have a seatbelt on. They pulled John out of the cockpit. He was up to his armpits. You know that story, right? They pulled John out of the plane. He went right, he put his hands up, which is normal. His arms went right up to his armpits, to the dashboard.
Well, what about you and your memories of...
I had a seatbelt on. My injury was due to a seatbelt, because my seatbelt held me in, but, I flew forward, obviously, and that's what caused the compression fracture in my back. So let's set the record straight. The reason John's back, the injury, who knows what it could have happened, but they pulled John's armpits out of the cockpit of the plane. He was buried up to his arms, trying to break it. He didn't have a seatbelt on.
Mm-hmm. Was the pilot, was he credentialed to be
No,
in
he
this
had no
spot
license, which we found out. Do you know about his girlfriends having a double knockout at the door?
No.
Do you know about that?
No.
Well, it's funny, but I could tell a story of myself right now. I'm not going to tell it myself this time because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But we all had a lot going on. You know, my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, he said, I used to say to him sometimes, I think I said it to him later in life as he became sick, you know, the will to live. Because I used to, and to this day, I'm really sympathetic towards people that have paralysis and that. I'm not sure if I was ever paralyzed that I would want to be alive. I couldn't, you know, I don't know if I could deal with it. My dad always said to me, the will to live, you have no idea, is so much stronger than anything else. And I don't want to disagree with that thought process. I just don't know how I would deal with that type of injury. So getting back to Mike Farkas, I'm sorry, is that when we crashed, right, we're all dealing with our own stuff. And I had something going on behind the scenes that I didn't want anybody to know about, especially my wife, Leslie. So the first words out of my mouth, and I've seen this guy twice since the accident, where I said, I've got something in my shaving kit, get it. Because we were loading us up back then, we had those ambulances where they put the tiers like this. It wasn't like the 2 beds now. We were one of those old ambulances where they put us like this, right? And they said, hurry, I think we might lose this one. I thought they were talking about me. So I thought I was saying to some guy, I'm going to be dead, so I don't want my wife to see this. There's a little letter that somebody wrote me, and I want that gone. Sure enough, it was gone. But I mean, it wasn't me they were talking about Bob Bruggers, who went into shock. But the first thing I remember is telling that guy that as they were taking me out of the plane. And that's kind of what set that process through my mind over the years, that, you know, when something really does go down, you better not have anything that you don't want anybody to find out about, because it does click. I'm living proof, because that's the first thing I thought about, you know. Well, Michael Farkas, you know, never regained consciousness. He was engaged to a girl in Denver, Colorado that flew in. He was engaged to a girl in Charlotte. Both at the door. Wow. Half hour apart. Nice to meet you, honey. Nice to meet you. You can imagine how bad that was. So
that's a crazy situation.
Huh?
That's a crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was common knowledge. It was incredibly sad. I feel bad. It's funny, I've never held a grudge against Michael. I mean, I feel bad for Michael Farkas to this day. I mean, I didn't lose anything but some time. And for some reason, it's enhanced my legend. I don't know why, because I was just lucky. I mean, it was God's gift that I came out of it like I did. But people will translate that into, wow, he came back. And I didn't come back from that much. I knew I wanted to be a wrestler, and I wasn't going to let that keep me down. But don't think I wasn't wrecked. I don't want anybody to think I wasn't a hero. You know, I went to my first match at Park Center 6 months later. I called Dave Johnson, who has passed away, who was the orthopedist at the Miller Clinic. I called him 5 times before I went in the ring that night from the payphone. I go, you sure I can go wrestle? He goes, yeah, Rick, I'm telling you, you can do it. I couldn't get myself to fall down. I could not get myself to fall down. So I was not the hero that everybody thought I was. Do you know how I took my first bump? You never heard the story? George Scott made me wrestle Tim Woods an hour every night until I took a backdrop. After 5 nights, Farmville, Virginia, I took a backdrop. Done wrestling Tim Woods for an hour. That's how I couldn't get myself to fall down. You know, once I took that first backdrop, I was fine. But as I took it, you know, that's when I started landing on my side, which people talk about for years. I've always landed on my side. Just psychological, you know.
When you were being taken to the emergency room from the plane, I mean, obviously your first thought you mentioned was is you wanted to protect some of the people that you love. But did you think about your career at all? Did you think about this would be a career-ending injury, or did you?
No, and not at first. I just didn't. I wanted to know that I was going to live first. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. And guess who the first person I saw was?
Wow.
Yeah. Boy, I mean, which was unheard of back then. They thought Wahoo came in the hospital to kick my ass. They did. They were like, they called the cops to get Wahoo out of the emergency room. He just broke all lines of kayfabe. I mean, he walked in the door and see if we were okay. He didn't give a shit. That's what kind of man he was. But they called the police because they thought Wahoo was coming in to kick everybody's ass while we were down. So, I mean, it's a true story. I was laying at that metal table. I remember freezing my ass off. And, you okay, boy? I said, yeah. He said, I ain't leaving. Don't worry. He just told everybody in the hospital, telling nurses to move and people to move. And they called the police. They removed him. But that was Wahoo right there.
They made a big deal about protecting that Tim Woods was on the plane because he was involved.
Yeah.
In
He went wrestle in Greensboro.
Yeah. Well, but they made a point because he was supposed to wrestle Valentine that night, and if it came out that the two of them were on the same plane, and it almost killed you because if Wahoo was on that plane,
Yeah.
it would have done the same thing, and
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have been able to get away with it.
No. No one knew who George Wooden was. How we pulled it off. They never found out it was Tim Woods. They're not as sneaky as they are now. They weren't as sneaky back then as they are now.
Well, the press probably gave you a lot of passes then. And you talked about even the cops. Gosh, I don't. Did you have like 80 speeding tickets at some point?
82.
82. I mean, you wouldn't even make it past 5 today. You know?
Oh, I know. Yeah, but no, there was no reciprocal agreement. All of a sudden, one day there was a reciprocal agreement with states. And I got that speeding. I got 2 in one night coming back from Greensboro, 82 and 86. And for the first time they had that list, the judge goes, 82 moving violation in 5 years? What is this? I said, I just drive a lot. He said, you sure do, but you're not driving anymore. 30 days in jail. They took me down. My lawyer had me out. I was scared to death. I mean, God, going to jail for speeding. Because in South Carolina, we just got the ticket, gave them $20, and threw it away and kept going. They used to get 5 going to Charleston sometimes in one day. We didn't care. I mean, nobody thought about it. Didn't slow us down.
Right.
Which is a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure. But I mean, I wasn't the only one that was, getting speeding tickets. I probably got more.
The same article I read concerning Valentine, saying that you could have been in that front seat. His wife made a comment that she felt like the people involved with the crash, specifically you, didn't do a good job following up with him after the fact. Does that hurt you? Because
I'm the only one that did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took John to a lot of shows. That'd be absolutely incorrect as well. They were a different family. They had 26 cats.
Say no more.
Huh?
Say no more.
Do you know that story?
No.
They had 26 cats. They couldn't sell the house because the cat smell in the house was so bad that they had to have the whole house gutted. They couldn't lose it. They called John's wife's nickname was the Cat Woman. So I didn't go over there a lot for dinner, but I had John to my place a lot. I just couldn't do it. I'm allergic to cats anyway, but that would be totally untrue. As a matter of fact, Red Bastine and I probably took John to 5 shows together because Red was on her at that time.
Why do you think some other people avoided him?
He didn't have a lot of friends. Yeah, John was a loner, which I think is pretty well known in the business. And he was a ribber,
Right.
Bad ribber, which left him. He had a huge reputation for ribbing people. You've heard some of the ribs, I'm sure. I mean, bad ribs. Smasher Sloan shot him with a spear gun one time because he missed it. He had Smasher Sloan driving around Florida, 300 miles out of the way on his first date, ran home with Eddie Graham, waiting for him at the building. And John took him 300 miles out of the way to the wrong town. Sloan got out of the car and shot him with a spear gun.
Wow.
The guy's back. You know about the one with Buddy Rogers or with Jay York and the atomizer, right?
I've heard it, but tell the story.
Yeah, well, it was Jay or Mike. It was Jay York. Buddy Rogers was in the dressing room. Jay, Mike, Valentine. Jay York had asthma, and Valentine filled his, what are these things called?
The inhalers.
The inhaler, full of lighter fluid. Jay came back in the ring, back in the room, wheezing and shot himself full of lighter fluid. Fell down, regained, went back out, got a shotgun, came in the car, I thought it was Rogers, and blew up Rogers' gold Halliburton with a shotgun. Those guys, they were bad ribbon back then, and that's just something you don't, John, I don't want to, it was entertaining, but it was nothing that I've never liked that aspect of our business. I've never ribbed anybody. I mean, I've had fun ribs, but to me, a rib is when everybody laughs at the end of the rib.
Right.
Yeah, I've never done anything hurtful to anybody, and I've never agreed with that, and I've seen a lot of it over the years. Don't really understand where that comes from, because it doesn't make you a better worker, doesn't make you thought of any higher, but we've had a lot of ribbers in business. but I don't think ultimately it paid off for any of them at the end.
You came back from the crash very quickly. I mean, I know you're kind of minimizing the accident, but I mean, breaking your back and being able to perform at the level you did is probably an amazing task. I mean, no matter how minor the break was, but
Well, it wasn't minor, but it did heal itself. It's like, that's what I'm saying. I'm not taking away from what I went through, but I just didn't. I never had a negative doubt in my mind in my life until 1989.
so you knew it was just a matter of time you were coming back. It
Yeah,
was-
yeah. When he told me that I was going to be okay, which was about 3 months in, by that time that he could tell by the X-rays, and keep in mind is the important thing is that medical technology was not back then what it is now, so it was anybody's guess, but he could tell by the way I was healing, and the insensitivity of our business, which probably I should thank George Kopp for. I walked in the office with my back brace on one day, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm a hero, and he looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And he was right. By wearing the back brace, every other muscle in my body was atrophying. So, but it made it hard. You can't, this and this right here does not always make this work the right way. So I started walking, by myself up and down the street or with my daughter. It was like, Megan was like just 2 years old then, but instead of walking with the back brace on, I started walking without it to strengthen my body. And then the thing I did, which, believe it or not, it really, I think, helped me with my injury, was I laid on my stomach and I did these arches like this. I did 500 a day. At one time, my muscles back here were like, you saw younger pictures of me, they were like I had done something, but I did 500 a day for 6 months. And I did those for about 2 years after, not 500, but I did them at least 200 a day for about 2 years after I started wrestling again. And that, protected area. And that didn't do anything to heal the bones, but it made my back stronger. Because knock on wood, this is strange too. After 35 years, I feel like I'm 12 years old. That's one of my problems, Michael. I don't hurt. I feel like $1 million. And I should be, donated to Duke by now, but for research.
and to see, and what do you think of? You say that, but some of the guys, your contemporaries from that era,
Yeah.
their bodies are so beat up.
Yeah.
And you didn't do anything helpful outside of wrestling to
Nothing. And I took more bumps than any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you'd worked Tim Woods a lot of times right after you got back into wrestling and stuff. But how did Ric Flair as the performer change after the accident?
Well, number one, I was in the process of putting together the Ric Flair, the Nature Boy persona. And number two, it gave me a chance to change my look because I went down to 180 pounds. And I was like 255 or 260. I was still kind of heavy. So I just knew then I wanted to look a little different. That's the first time I realized cosmetics, but I watched my diet. I've kept I've never been over 240 since the airplane crash.
Don't give up. Don't give up. Fight forever. Don't give up. Fight forever. Don't give up. Fight forever. Fight forever and ever and ever and ever.